And I am delighted to welcome all of you here this evening, and particularly delighted um, by our speaker this evening. Many of you know her, Kim Eppehimer, who, Kim, I've lost track. I know you have been the executive director of Friendship House since Bill Perkins retired, and I'm tempted to say, oh, that was 2 or 3 years ago, but I have a feeling it was a whole lot longer than that.
Yeah, since 2017, and I've been with the organization since 2014.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay. And we haven't aged a day, any one of us.
Nope.
Yep. And many of you may know that there has been a recent alignment of organizations, and Kim, you may even want to say a word or two about that at the beginning between Limen House and Friendship House.
Mhm.
And Kim is now the CEO or director of that combined organization, which brings tremendous presence and capability together to help people in our community. So before I say any more and make a mistake, I will turn it over to Kim, who will give us some of that background. And then um, the primary focus tonight is the recognition, the awareness that being without housing in the city of Wilmington is increasingly difficult. And the mayor has created a task force to look homelessness in
Yes,
Wilmington.
that
And
little you
Kim,
picked up for me at the gym.
excuse me while I mute Andrew. 1 second. There we go. Um, and so Kim is a part of that organization that is seeking to develop a greater understanding of the obstacles that exist and the ways that steps might be taken to help those people who bear such a burden in not having a place to call home. So let me turn it over to you, Kim.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sue. And good evening, everyone. It's nice to see you all here. Many familiar faces and names. So, very briefly, as Sue said, and actually, first, I just want to give a quick shout out. I know it takes many people to put these on every week, and it's so impressive that you've been doing this program for so many years. And Sue, you do such a lovely job leading these, acting as hostess. And I am always grateful. I go back and watch many of the recordings, and it is such a wonderful gift to the community. So, thank you. And it's an honor to be part of this. As Sue said, just kind of to give you some background of the Friendship House and Lyman partnership, it has been decided for these two organizations to come together as one. It is not an official merger. Both organizations will continue to exist, but they will be nestled underneath a parent company that will have a new name and be another nonprofit. And everything will essentially function through that parent, but both organizations will exist because they have such deep tenure and history within our community. For those of you not familiar, Lyman Recovery and Wellness has been around for almost 60 years, and their focus is helping those with substance use disorder. So they have many treatment options, and they've just recently opened up a residential treatment center for folks. So it's a 24-hour care, and folks can come in and they get significant level of care, love, and clinical treatment. And then from there, they can graduate into Lyman's Sober Living, which has been around for the longest, and that gives them additional time to work on their recovery. It's a beautiful program. They've incorporated mental health as well as they merged with Triad, another tried and true organization in Wilmington a couple of years ago. And so when we started to talk about how we as organizations can really make sure we're providing our best selves, especially in a climate where nonprofits are going to continue to find it very difficult to find resources. And the groups that we focus on, especially, are beginning to become under fire from the federal administration. We knew it was important to band together versus trying to fight alone. And so that's what we've done. I've been the honor to then step in as CEO of the entire thing. So currently I'm acting as CEO for both Friendship House and Limen Recovery and Wellness. And then when the new organization is created, I'll be CEO of that, with both, again, nestled underneath it. And for those that may not be familiar with Friendship House, we've been around for almost 40 years working with those who are experiencing what I call various forms of homelessness. We work with folks who are actively unhoused and trying to provide them with significant love, dignity, and care as they go on their journey trying to achieve what they are looking to achieve. And what I mean by that is we don't dictate to them what they should do. We offer options of what they could do so they have control over what they're doing. We also work with folks to prevent homelessness, and that's actually the majority of our resources we invest in, is helping people to not become unhoused. So our clothing bank program, which is focused on workforce development, our significant transitional housing program, which is largely supported by Westminster, and also at our empowerment centers through our financial assistance program. It's all geared towards people staying housed and getting them to a point of being self-sufficient. Friendship House has touched the lives of 17,000 people every year. So it's a pretty broad stretch that we do. It is a deep honor and become quite a love and passion of mine. And in the past several years, I've turned towards advocacy as, in my opinion, and the opinion of Friendship House, folks are unhoused because the system has ultimately let them down. It's not because they're choosing to be homeless or they have done something wrong that has caused them to become unhoused. So as we fight for their rights and for their ability to live the life they're looking to lead, it means we also have to look at the system. And so to give that as the background, that kind of brings us to the topic tonight. And one of the pressures that we were putting on our mayor is to enact a homelessness task force to really start looking at the systematic issues and therefore what are some of the addresses we can offer in order to help our neighbors who are suffering. The challenges in Wilmington are significant, and that's what I want to talk about some tonight. I want to kind of go into what's happening in Wilmington, as well as where we are with the task force and what we can hope to expect from it. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So you have something else you can look at. All right. So let's chat a little bit about what's happening in Wilmington and why there's even a need for this task force. And I think many of you can appreciate that it is obvious homelessness is rising. The point in time count that is done by Housing Alliance Delaware is showing these numbers every year. And one of the most alarming numbers that has increased since COVID is the unhoused population specifically. So this includes folks that are living on the street, in their cars, in situations such as also abandoned buildings that are determined to be uninhabitable. That is what's considered to be unhoused. It doesn't always include folks that are in shelters. That number has gone up significantly the past couple of years, and we can see it in Wilmington, and we can feel it at the level of services that there's a higher demand on what we are providing. The other thing that's really been difficult is the curve that you would kind of imagine of the average age of those that are experiencing homelessness has really started to flatten out. And what I mean by that is we're seeing more younger folks and more older folks that are becoming actively unhoused and not in shelters. And that's making it difficult to have sufficient and holistic services that really meet everyone's needs. The other challenge is that we're losing on options. So because we're seeing more demands that are needed and a wider array of services that are being asked from organizations such as Friendship House, it's getting harder and it's taking longer for people to seek what they need. The biggest demand from every person is housing. If you are on the younger side, and in Delaware, unless you are 18 or over, you are considered a minor. So if you're 17 or younger, it is a very different situation to be unhoused than if you're 18 and over. And I'm guessing many of you would agree, there's really not much that can differentiate a 17-year-old from an 18 or a 19-year-old. So someone who is 18, 19, 20, living on their own, they need a very different set of services and help and guidance than somebody who is maybe 40, 45, or 50, who maybe has more life experience and maybe has even experienced what it's like to be stable, and they know what they're looking for. In addition, as we're looking at folks who are on the older range, they need very different services. And a lot of it is they need different medical services. We're seeing a significant rise in those that have substance use disorder who are older. And when you're dealing with other issues that come in, when you're dealing with an older age, it is a much more complicated situation than it is for somebody who is maybe younger. So there's less options, there's less housing, and the tolerance for needs is becoming thinner. And so there's also now an increase of the visual challenges. People see there's an increase of the unhoused. And one of the things we hear so much from public comment at our task force with the Wilmington Homelessness Task Force is that people don't want to have to literally walk over someone on the sidewalk trying to get from home to work. And so that's something I'm going to spend a little bit of time getting into is the changes that we're seeing in Wilmington. So task force responsibilities, what are we charged to do? Well, we're charged to review city policies, propose use of state resources. And that is one of the challenges. And I'm no expert on this, but we do know that the city, the county, and the state all have different buckets of resources, and they can be used in possibly different ways. And we're looking and hoping for more coordination at all three levels and looking at different resources from all three in order to help address the challenge of increasing resources, not just in the city, but potentially county and statewide. And then recommend service strategies. So this is one of the biggest call to actions is we are called to literally put forth, here are some strategies that we've vetted, that we've talked about, we've asked the public to comment on, and strategies that we'd like to see you consider and potentially even please implement. We're also going to suggest housing engagement models and gather input from impacted individuals. So who's on the task force? People like me, community service organization representatives. There's residents of Wilmington that are on the task force. Downtown Visions has a seat. There's city council members, as well as DHSS and police and even transit reps. So one of the goals was to try to have an eclectic voice of folks who are being both impacted and have a passion towards working together. Every position was appointed by Mayor Carney. Some of the ideas that are on the table. Well, currently what's been discussed is, can there be a self-encampment in a city park? So this means there is essentially public space that everybody knows is going to be an encampment. And are there certain resources that could be put in place to make that feasible? Showers, porta potties, maybe storage facilities. Is there even maybe some sort of a security to protect belongings and to help govern any potential issues that may exist? Tiny homes. So for those of you that may be following along what's happened in Sussex, the Springboard Collaborative has created a wonderful village. Tiny, I don't know that they would call it tiny homes, but it's tiny homes, a pallet shelter. And it's been really effective on getting people in and then working with them to try to get them to secure and safe, self-sufficient housing. I will say that they are struggling with resources in Sussex, and that's been a big issue, is they also have housing problems, but it's been pretty powerful. And so they've engaged in conversations at both Wilmington and in Newark to see, can this be replicated? There's also talk about, quote, a drop-in center. Not too dissimilar on what you see with what Friendship House does with our Wilmington Empowerment Center, but potentially on a larger scale, and one that is maybe not in the center of the city. So something that would help, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on your opinion, pull folks away from the direct city of the city where it's being so gentrified and built up economically. And then services would be provided there, case management, access to bathrooms, potentially showers, as much as possible, as much as resources would allow. And then also personal storage place. So a place where folks can lock up items as they are going through the city. One of the challenges we do have is that some of the public places folks can go don't allow more than maybe one or two bags. And some folks who are living on the street have to carry their world with them as they go through because they have nowhere else to put their items. In addition, sometimes people will have items on them that maybe are considered contraband depending on where they're going in. So if there's a way for them to lock some of those items up securely, could they then enter locations they otherwise wouldn't be allowed to enter into? So these are some of the ideas that we've been starting with, and they've started to also add in potential other options. We've also talked about how do we increase affordable housing, and I have been a big advocate towards keeping housing first as a model to focus on as we're thinking through housing options. So challenges that we face. So one of the big ones is stigma runs deep. There are a lot of folks that come into this with the assumption and belief that people are choosing to be unhoused. And so therefore they don't understand why they're not seeking services. And that's a really complicated angle to try to help people understand that a lot of folks can't access services because of the barriers that the system has put in place. One of the classic ones would be somebody who doesn't have an ID, doesn't have their birth certificate, can't get many of the basic services that are needed. They can't get insurance. They can't do housing applications. A lot of different shelters might turn them away if they don't have an ID. Just the basic needs may not be met for somebody at that level. But then it goes further. If you have someone who's really looking to apply for employment or for housing and it's asking for where you currently reside and you don't have an address, that's really difficult. Or you don't have the $50 or $75 to put towards an application for an apartment complex. Or perhaps you don't have a bank account and the only thing the job that you're applying to will do is pay through direct deposit. There's a lot of complications for folks that those of people who have a place that they've never had these challenges in front of them have no idea these exist. And these are just kind of high level basic ones. It gets much more complicated when you're dealing with different groups that have very personal challenges that they have to face. There's also community resistance. So coming back to what's happening really in the city of Wilmington, from my point of view, a big challenge is the fact that the city has invested quite a bit into economic development. Now, this is a great thing for a city that wants to thrive. You need resources, you need money, you need people living in your city that are contributing to the city in a financial and civic way. And that has gone really well in Wilmington. And it's really been neat to see a lot of the new restaurants and buildings that are going up. You can physically see the community is coming to life in different ways that it hadn't before. However, with that comes the stigma, the lack of understanding, or purely a fear when people who are walking from one place to another and they're trying to get maybe from their rental unit or their home to their place of and where they work and they walk and they have to walk past an encampment. Worse, they often complain they have to step over somebody who's asleep on a sidewalk. Worse, they're even seeing different signs of people who live on streets who don't have access to bathrooms. And we are seeing an increase of use of illegal substances, and there have been some needles that have been left behind that cannot be guaranteed to be traced to unhoused folks, but that is where the community is coming. So as all this is starting to grow, with Friendship House, we're feeling it directly because of our location of the Wilmington Empowerment Center. So if you can envision Market Street in Wilmington, where the hub of restaurants are, all the way down to the waterfront, where the hub of housing is starting to really flourish, we're in the middle of it. You go Market Street, Orange Street, it's right there. And there's more restaurants, bars, living places that are actually being built right there on Orange Street. So it's becoming more challenging for folks who are coming out of where they were sleeping, or they are choosing to sleep on the sidewalk outside of our location in order to access our resources when we open. So we open at 7 a.m. People could start hanging out as early as 6:30, 6:45, just waiting. All they're doing is just waiting for us to open. And at that point, we are their only resource. They can come in, they can charge their phones, they have access to restrooms, they just have a place they know that they can just exist. And so it's in a challenging location when all this buildup is happening around us. So other challenges we face are fast timelines with deep planning. So when the task force was formed, we were formed with 6 months to come up with a strategy to provide to City Council and to the mayor. And we did not all come with the same level set of information. So we have spent several meetings educating, introducing people to even the basics of what does it mean to refer someone through 1-833 Find Bed or 211. What are the resources that do exist, so that we're not trying to recreate something that already is out there, but how do we use those resources toward our strategic thinking? And mixed in that, we need to do some really deep thinking. The easy answers aren't the right answers in this case, because we need to bring a lot of voices, we need to do a lot of listening, and we need to break the models and really think outside of the box, because it hasn't been working so far. We also need to use examples of what has worked. And there's many examples in nearby cities of things that are going well. And we've had some people from the national level of different organizations come and present to say, have you considered, or look what's working well here. So that's been really nice, but it takes time to sort of learn, educate, and then start getting into the conversations. And then, of course, balancing public and unhoused needs, which kind of goes back to the first 2 points of stigma and community resistance. There's no doubt that people that live in Wilmington want to have a city that they feel safe and they feel they can thrive, they can really call home. And that includes those that have a place that their name is on a rental agreement, as well as those who don't. But they're not always faced with the same equality. And so some people are putting some needs above others. And how do we balance both and truly say everybody deserves to call Wilmington home? And I think that's going to be one of the harder pieces, is because people have a hard time seeing that it can be both. There seems to be this tug of war that it needs to be one versus the other. So what are we learning? Well, so far, no single agency can solve this. Even though I do feel Friendship House is doing it very well, we do need to work together. And it's really critical that everybody is willing to bring things to the table, both the things that they can't do and admit, I'm not good at this, to here's what I'm doing really well. Or I could do this better if I could use this from you, or I can give you this. And so we need to really break down those silos and find a way to work truly together. The other thing that I think many of you already know, but others are starting to learn, is that lived experience matters. It is not effective for those of us who have never been unhoused to tell someone who's unhoused how they should be living or how they should solve the situation that they're in. It's unfair and it's undignified. And that's one thing that we've really enjoyed, is the public comment piece of every task force meeting. You get all voices. You get the voices of those who are challenged with, they want to stay in Wilmington, but they are very anxious about the increase of the unhoused population. What does it feel like to really live in Wilmington and be concerned with the unhoused neighbors, as well as what is it like to be unhoused and to be turned away and to be told you don't matter? And these two voices are being shared at the same meetings where they get to look each other in the eyes and talk. So public will exist, but needs coordination. And I think that is one that is a constant challenge to really fight through, is people at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. We want a city that everybody can thrive in. But it comes back to the first point, we can't do it by ourselves. It's really going to require coordination, but it's more than just the agencies. We cannot do this without the city's commitment And beyond that, we need the county and the state. If there's any magic wand, it would be to say we all are working at this at the same level, at the same angle. But there's a lot of different groups that are being created to try to address this problem at the state level, at the county, and at the city level. So we recognize that, and we're really hoping we can start crossing the divide and having bigger conversations at every level. And then solutions must be layered. I have been saying this for years. There's not one answer. And even the things that we come up with as a task force may not work for every person. There has to be a sense of flexibility and truly letting the person be at the center of care. How does that person with their individual needs get what they need and want? Because that's what they deserve. So then to quickly wrap up, progress is possible, but never perfect. And so we are on this journey somewhat together, and we're really trying to focus on how do we put things in motion, knowing that we're not going to close our books in 6 months and pat ourselves on the back and say, hey, look at us, we did it. But here's a significant push forward is what we're hoping, and that we're changing the narrative on what it means to come together and really talk as a community to address an issue we all care deeply about. And that is one thing I can say for sure. Every person at these meetings, whether they're on the task force or they're making public comment, they care. There is deep passion at the root of everything that is coming out. And if we can just do a better job of making sure that that passion isn't biasing our ability to listen, I think then that's going to be a really huge step forward. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to stop sharing so that we can open it up for any questions that you might have for me. And I would say, Sue, you can handle it. I'm comfortable with people just coming off mute, but if you want to raise your hand, just let me know. Casey, yes, I see your hand is raised. Oh, nope, that was my mouse on top of you. I put you on the spot. I apologize.
So if you have a question or a comment, if you'd like to use the raise hand button or raise your hand, Andrew, you'll need to unmute.
I'm doing that.
All right.
Oh, there we go. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
My name's Andrew. I have not been a part of any of your meetings in the past. I guess my wife got an email about this and she shared it, and it's something that I'm familiar with. So, Kim, excellent work you're doing there in Wilmington. Excellent ideas, excellent strategy for moving forward and trying to address some of the unhoused issues that you're dealing with in Wilmington and nationally even. I didn't hear a couple of things that I just have suggestions, comments on, and you may be able to respond to that you just didn't mention it because it was a part of a bigger package, or, it's just something outside of your bailiwick. But the couple of things that immediately caught my attention is, you speak about, shelters and places where they can bathe and places where bathrooms and storage. On a larger long-term basis, I mean, I hope, and if not, I suggest, are you working with the groups that specialize in affordable housing? And I say that not only from the standpoint of providing affordable housing to the unhoused, but to the hundreds and thousands of those that are right on the edge, one paycheck away from being homeless and needing affordable housing, which I'm new to Delaware, but I've not seen a great big interest in affordable housing. And in particular, have you had discussions about inclusionary zoning, where all of these developers out here that are building these mega communities and making millions, and rightfully so, hey, that's business. We've developed laws where they have to build MPDUs or whatever you call them in this region, but it's not something that's easily accepted because developers work on margins. They want to get every percentage they can. But when you partner with the state, with the federal, with the private sector, you can certainly come up with creative ways where developers not only still make their percentages because they're allowed to build additional housing, but they also get the prestige and the PR from it. And the
Yeah.
final thing I have, and I see you jumping at the bit here, the final piece I have, and then I will disappear. And let me share. I'm somewhat of an expert in this field. I worked 30 years building affordable housing and actually wrote legislation in Montgomery County and Maryland on inclusionary zoning, affordable housing, and MPDUs. So that was another life 100 years ago. But I'm new to Delaware. I moved here a year ago permanently, my wife and I. The last thing I would say is you mentioned the uninhabitable buildings in
Yep.
Wilmington. That is a perfect starting place for getting funding. And there's usually funding through state grants and all to be able to take that and build it into something that's habitable. And if nothing else, get people that would be willing to live there and work on what programs we've developed called sweat equity, where they can actually help themselves and get funded for it. So all of that you may have already done, all of that may already be doing. I didn't hear any of it in your unhoused presentation because it may have been a bigger pitch. But those are my suggestions, recommendations, and certainly I've seen these programs not only work, I've created programs that have been welcomed by the community. And now we always have the NIMBYism, we know that.
Yeah.
But when you bring them in at the very beginning and convince them that these folks are not going to eat their children, they're not criminals, they're not drug addicts, they're just people, and see that, it's something that I've had great success with. So those are my suggestions to you, Kim. Keep doing the wonderful job you do. And I just was listening, but wanted to comment if any of it is of any assistance to you.
Yes. Oh my goodness, Andrew, thank you. I put my email in the chat because I could spend another entire hour just on affordable housing, and I will keep it short. But I would very much welcome an opportunity for you and I to connect if you're so willing. So if you are, please get my email address. Or not, reach out to Sue and she'll get it. But to address some of what you said, we have talked about affordable housing, and one of the reasons I didn't bring it up is it's actually not always the direct solution, quote unquote, for someone who's unhoused, because the majority of affordable housing still requires some sort of income. It's not easy for someone to then qualify for and also maintain affordable housing. So that's the very high level, simple, way more complicated underneath that answer, but it is something for conversation. Now, in Delaware, I would say I don't think there are affordable housing experts. And for that, I mean, it's currently mostly on the shoulders of developers to choose to do that. And to your point, that's not always their goal, right? Because it's not always going to bring in sufficient income, especially in this environment. And it requires a lot of red tape. There's a lot of misnomers. People usually think affordable housing equates to Section 8, which carries a deep stigma, which is also unfortunate. So yes, our state deeply needs more housing that is reachable for folks who cannot afford market rate. But I think we need to break apart affordable housing as a program because it's another system that causes barriers for folks that can't reach it. So it's a very complicated one that I think needs a lot more love and support in Delaware. There is money out there for affordable housing. And in fact, Governor Meyer has recently put in a significant influx at Newcastle County level, and I think also at the state level for this purpose, for developers to grab and to use. So hopefully we're going to start seeing that come in the next couple of years. But as you know, in development, it's not a light switch. It takes a couple of years just to actually produce something if you're building from scratch. To your other point about sweat equity. Habitat is in our, I'm so sorry, I'm blanking on their full name. They are in the state, and there's a couple of them, Habitat for Humanity. And they are fantastic. And they do that program where people can then buy into it by doing work on a house. They will then get to start renting and paying for and own. It's a really, really good program. And I know the executive director of the Newcastle County Habitat for Humanity, that if you have any interest in, I'd be more than happy to connect you to him. Inclusionary zoning is something that is often talked about, and it is inconsistent in our state. It is not a statewide policy, but it is at the level of various districts. I strongly encourage it. I believe in it. I think it is something that is missing from a lot of our cities. And I think that is something that City of Wilmington absolutely needs to focus on 100%, especially now that there's such significant development that's happening. I think it is a missed opportunity. Where our empowerment center is in the city, which is at the corner of 8th and Orange, literally diagonal from that is a massive, beautiful, full market rate rental unit that's going up. I would love to see some significant affordable housing options in there for all the folks that are just 30 steps away from it. Finally, I want to say just Andrew, Montgomery County, my old stomping grounds. I grew up in Maryland, so I was there when you were doing your amazing work, and I thank you. And I hope that some of those policies can still live there and are doing their amazing work. So we have some familiar ties. So again, please consider reaching out to me. I would love to continue this conversation with you. So thank you for that very thoughtful question. I hope I've done it some justice.
Andrew says yes. Barry, I see a not digital hand raised, but
I haven't found my digital hand.
Yeah,
yet,
we
so.
can do that. We can do that.
Hey, Kim, hi, good evening.
Hi.
When was the task force established?
Yep. April? I don't remember the exact date now that you say that, but it was in the spring.
Wow. Have
Yeah.
you prepared your request for an extension yet?
No, and I'm not sure what that would look like. So I do know we have November, so we can go backwards from there. So maybe it was more like May that we were situated, but it is due in end November. And I will say we meet twice a month. It is no small amount of time that is being asked of the task force. And unfortunately, I've missed two meetings of the tenure because it's hard sometimes to go, but work is happening. We're having side task force committees. So I'm on a couple of them about the drop-in center. I think I'm on a couple of them to continue the conversations to get some of this moving. And I think we still have a chance to meet our deadline. And I have full faith that if it is needed to extend it, or if the work is so favorable, I can't imagine that Mayor Carney would just do away with it. I think if we're making progress and it's received in a good way, he would consider extending it. So stay tuned, Barry.
I'm just sensitive to you're being asked to do an awful lot, and to put a deadline on it that's tough. My other question is the task force thinking about what we in the general public can do to support your work?
Yeah. So public comment is one of the best things to do, is come and share and listen and learn. So that's the first thing. The other is to advertise. When you see that we are meeting, share it so that other people can also come. And there's always a virtual option as well as in person. And then the other one is when you're hearing or seeing something that you like, advocate for it, share why, right? If you're in the city of Wilmington, write to your city council person, say, I really like that they're doing this. And if you're hearing or seeing something that is deeply concerning, I would strongly encourage you, reach out to your city council person and say, I have deep concerns about this. I will share one concern that I have is that's been talked about putting up a barrier, for lack of a better word, where folks that are actively using or have illegal drugs on them are not allowed to be within, say, 50 or 100 feet of a provider of unhoused services or for the homeless. And I'm very much against that because that would prevent many folks from accessing services. So that is something that if that were to bother you, I would say that is a very good one to write to say, please don't support this. I am a fan of creating storage units. I'm a big fan of having more public access to trash cans, porta potties, ways for people to shower. I would write to your council folks saying, yes, please consider this as an option. So that would be a really positive way, Barry, to get your voices heard, is to let your city council folk hear what matters to you.
Okay.
We have in the past and increasingly at present, as Westminster's Peace and Justice Work Group, taken on the role of contacting the city and county and state representatives that cover the area where Westminster resides. Although we have members who come from all over, well outside the periphery, we clearly have a vested interest in the work that's going on. And so part of the work, the advocacy work that the Peace and Justice Work Group does, is to contact brand new, I guess, State Senator Daniel Cruz. There was an issue recently, and he was extraordinarily responsive. And so we see that, we are a resident of the area, and we have both the right and the responsibility to make our voices heard. Let me ask you, though, Kim, how do we know when your task force is having meetings? If we were to want to make public comment or come and learn about what's being discussed, how do we know when those meetings are held, when and where they're held?
Yeah, so it is not consistent schedule. It is varies on when and where. They try to mix them on days so that there's daytime and evening options for people to come for various reasons, and the location will always change. The August one, I think the 29th, but I will get that information to you, Sue, if you could send it out to your distribution list, will be at St. Andrews and Matthew Episcopal Church. So they'll be hosting that one. So that'll be lovely because then we get to showcase more of what Friendship House is doing and the work that we do. But they are public meetings, so they will be posted in the City of Wilmington's calendar of events is where you really should be able to find them. To be completely transparent, I get the privilege of getting an email and a calendar invite, and I've never had to go out into the public world to locate it. So that is something we can dig around, and I'll make sure and try to get that information better to you, because as I have witnessed from previous experiences and other situations, sometimes things slip through the cracks.
I can't imagine what you're talking about. Yeah. Thank you, Kim. That'd be great.
Yes.
Casey, you have your hand up.
Actually, Sue, you asked my question. I wanted to know whether there was a routine schedule for the meetings and how one found out about it. So you've already responded to that. Thanks.
And I will definitely follow up with that with Sue to get that out to you all. And I appreciate that. I would love to have some of you come and listen and experience it.
I received an email. I was going to go look for it, but I decided if I left this screen, I might never get back. From someone who was relating an individual who was interested in building small housing, little houses, whatever the terminology might be. I just have the individual's name and the statement that he had encountered one obstacle after another and didn't know where to turn. And I'm wondering if there's an access point or someone that you might suggest that I could direct this individual to see if perhaps some progress could be made.
Yeah, well, one thing, I'm a big fan of working with folks who are already in a similar field. So the first thing I would recommend is for them to reach out to Judd Malone with Springboard Collaborative. They're the ones that have done the tiny homes pallet shelter in Georgetown. So Sue, I'm happy to give you his email address and make that connection, because he's actively looking for that opportunity in Wilmington. So if there's someone else they could team up together, I think that would be fabulous. There's no, so that would be my first. The other would be potentially trying to connect him to someone in the city, and I can try to think through who that might be. But I think reaching out to those that are currently doing the work might be the best
That sounds like a
option.
great idea. Thank you for that, Kim. I'd love to
Yeah,
be
you're
able to
welcome.
follow up. Yep.
Any other questions that you all have about this, or even going back to, many of you have been Friendship House supporters for a very long time. Any questions about the Friendship House and Limen merger, or merger, not merger?
Merger, not merger.
Yeah, go ahead.
Maria.
Kim, I just had a question in terms of the individuals that are impacted, because I seem to, we think of single individuals, male or females, but I see couples with young children as well. So we're seeing families or parties of two where I don't know how small a dwelling would accommodate. And I kind of have a view of a complex of tiny homes for individuals, and maybe something a little larger for the smaller families, and that people could then transition into maybe other housings and jobs and other situations as they stabilize, just like they go through Family Promise, where you kind of make them whole, and then they're blessed on their way. So what are the thoughts concerning that?
Yeah, so I will say that the current setup that you can do with the tiny homes pallet shelter, there's many names for it, can accommodate couples and small families. So that is not, that doesn't eliminate that as an option for those folks. Typically, the need would be you have to have usually communal access to restrooms. And so just making sure that that is available, because they are beds. That's essentially, they are safe beds that are heat and air controlled, that can be locked. So that is sort of the beauty about them. And you have space for personal belongings, but you don't have space for a child perhaps to really expand their play, right? So you would need to have to think about green space and access to a park and ways and for that child to then really get creative and fun and just go be a kid. But it could do a small family. And I think one of the challenges that we are seeing, homelessness is everywhere for everyone. No one is going to, is exempt from this. And we are seeing an increase of families and children who are being deeply impacted. I think one of the things our state does do well is provide more shelter for folks who have kids. And largely it's because we don't have an option otherwise. They cannot allow kids living on the street. That is just not an option. But that means there's so much there. There's not enough resources for those that without children is one of the challenges. But it is a hidden, I think people are shocked to know how many folks that go to your neighborhood school are actively experiencing homelessness, that are in a shelter. For those of you that have followed along with the Hope Center, that is the number one demographic that comes there, are families. And so it is something that is widespread in our state, I'm afraid.
One of the things I can envision
Right,
as well is in those little house spaces is a community-like building that would house bathrooms, shower
Yes.
areas for social services, maybe for a small medical unit corner, etc., so that community services could be housed right there on site. The other thing is, I keep looking at, there's a group, and I don't know who owns them, whether it's in Newcastle County off of Route 41. It used to be the old Bissell TB Center. and it's on Route 41. It has actually been closed. It has multiple buildings and a huge site in terms of land that has been basically unused for the last 30 years, at least that I'm familiar, because I've lived close to that neighborhood. And I keep looking at that and say, why isn't somebody either using those buildings if they can be used, or demolish them and use that space? Because I think it, and the other thing is, of course, access to transportation.
Oh, yeah.
Route 41, that would be possible, good transport to Kirkwood Highway, etc. So again,
Yeah.
things like that.
I agree. And just again, go back to the pallet shelter in Georgetown. They do have a community center there. They've got communal bathrooms. They provide food. They do 3 meals a day, and they do provide services. So we actually are on site providing case management a few days a week. They've got a contract with First State Community Action to provide significant case management. So they are very much wrapping around services for these folks, medical, all of it. And yeah, I pass by that Bissell location always also to come into work. And I know there's been a lot of different things that it looks like they've been trying to do with it. I cannot speak to that. But yes, if anybody would like to find someone who wants to gift that to us, I promise we'll put it to good use.
I think it would be wonderful to, if it would be possible, to have the Georgetown people kind of video their facility for us as part of a kind of empowering the rest of us to see what it could look like in our communities, in our areas, and make real good community living. I think that would be a good salesman job.
Yeah, Judd is actually fantastic at presenting it. So, Sue, I would highly recommend, if you haven't had him on your Thursday night, I think he'd be a wonderful speaker to share.
Thank you. Thank you. I will do that. A couple of other topics. The Urban Mission Committee at Westminster has recently become aware of an organization called 1 in 7B. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but it's a small piece, but it is focused on providing unhoused people with access to showers and laundry facilities, and it's mobile. And we had the head of that organization come and speak to us, and it's just a powerful, powerful thing. They would love to expand, have more facilities. So it's, again, peripheral to the fundamental need, and yet it's a fundamental need. And to offer that cleanliness and clean clothes and supplies and food to people is just a heartwarming ministry and mission, and we're looking for ways that we might support that. We're also in touch with someone from the Red Clay School District, because there is a program in each of the school districts to focus on providing assistance to homeless children, with a recognition that children throughout their educational process encounter a range of obstacles and difficulties. But when you are homeless, it adds a whole layer of difficulty and complexity. And the idea is that it would be helpful for us to know what the challenges are and the ways in which they're being met. And once again, what are ways that either we could engage or advocate to help provide support to children who have no place to call home and yet still are seeking to further their education, and their parents are seeking that for them as well. So yet another speaker that we will invite to a Thursday evening program. And Andrew, I think you have your hand up again.
Yes, I did. Just 2 quick comments. One was, I note that a lot of folks are talking about, what can be done about why this building isn't being addressed or why certain services. And I always tell folks, as I'm sure you've said and always say to people as well, you have to go to your legislature. Everybody has to write your legislators, your senators, your Congress folks. You got to write them. They can only move on stuff that we put in front of them. But that was just a comment. The question I had to Kim was, are you affiliated with and work with the Friendship House over in Sandy Spring, or y'all are all separate?
Separate. Yeah, we're not affiliated with any other organization. Friendship House does seem to be a somewhat popular name. Friendship House, Friendship Place. But no, we are our own. We were actually formed by a couple of churches right here in Wilmington.
No, because that's the Friendship House over in Sandy Spring. It's the churches, and they
Yeah.
have the affordable element, and they do all of the same
Nice.
stuff that you're doing. That's why I was curious. I was
Yeah,
there a
no,
month
I'll have
ago.
to look them up though. That sounds neat.
Yeah, but okay. I was just curious about that, and I will shoot you an email tomorrow.
Good. I look forward to that.
One of the things that we have heard from any number of speakers reflects the somewhat unique situation that we experience here in Delaware, being a small state. And we have had more than one speaker say, if you are in the Delaware legislature, let alone the county council or city councils, if you get 20 calls on a topic, that registers on a seismograph. If you get 50 calls or 80 calls, that is a significant indicator. It doesn't take thousands. It takes dozens, maybe 100. And so I think this idea of identifying and focusing on some key initiatives or issues and organizing to contact our representatives is likely to have an effect in ways that if you're in Pennsylvania or New York or Florida, you might get lost in the rounding. Not so much here. And I think we need, as individuals and as representatives of organizations, to be aware of the power of our voices because of the size that we're dealing with here in this state. It's tempting to say, it won't matter, I'm just one person, but it can. And we should look for Westminster's Peace and Justice Work Group will sign on to initiatives. And in addition to doing that, I think if we share that action with all of you and others and say, if you agree with this, contact your representative, make your voice heard, speak up as well. It certainly can't hurt. Well, we're at the end of our time. I want to thank Kim in the midst of, I don't know, she's got 2 or 3 things going on. Thank you for taking the time to be here. Thank you to each of you for being here this evening. I think it's often easy, even for those of us who see ourselves as engaged in outreach and ministry and care for those in need. It's easy for people who are unhoused, the circumstances they face, the challenges, to fly below the radar for many of us. We sort of know about it, but it's not like right here. And I think elevating the issues, I think the idea of attending some of the task force meetings and hearing what people have to say makes it more real and is likely to motivate us and engage us in taking more action. So again, Kim, thank you so much for being here, and thank you to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Have a good evening. I think the worst of the storm in Newcastle County is past, I hope. Next week, we're going to have a very interesting speaker and topic. Christian Willauer is a brand new member of the Wilmington City Council, and she has been doing extensive research into the implications of the property reassessments in Newcastle County. She will speak to the inequities that she has identified and the work that she believes needs to be done. Even if you don't live in Newcastle County, you might find this to be an intriguing topic. And if you do live here, you may have a personal interest in hearing what Christian has to say. So we hope to see you all here next Thursday at 7 o'clock.
Thank you so much, everyone. It's been a pleasure.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.